All right, welcome to Peeps Creek, the cafe where we serve you delightful, slightly intense, but definitely worthwhile conversations. A podcast focused on bringing people together by drinking, listening, and conversing. So grab your favorite drink and let's see what's on today's menu. All right, people, welcome to Peeps Creek. This is episode 38, straight up, no chaser, subtitle, back to blackness. All right. So, here at the cafe, we always have a drink. And guess what? I am here by my lonesome once again, but that's perfectly fine. We're still going to keep the show rolling. Hopefully, this is going to be a good and entertaining conversation, but one that you possibly can gain something from or be like, nah, bro, you all over the place. But what matters is that there is some kind of interaction in regards to, or some kind of response in regards to that. So let's see what we are drinking on right now. Boom, boom, boom. Look at that. We got us some good old water. Look at that. That is some good old ice water. Let me turn this cup around. I am drinking on some H2O. Look at that. Beautiful. Yeah. H2O. My trusty hookah. All right, so let's get ready to go into the cafe. All right, so welcome to the cafe. So, back to blackness. So, what is this topic about? So, basically, what I wanted to do, there are quite a few things that have happened in the news that I just felt like that I just want to talk about, things that just resonate with me or forces me to think a little bit about a topic or situation. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about is coming to America. So, all right. So this movie was released on March 5th, 2021 on Amazon Prime. There was a lot of people out there before it was released saying, oh, we don't want you to remake, leave a special, or leave a, I don't, what's the word? Leave a classic alone, right? And so there was angst about whether or not this was going to be funny. Was it going to be related to the other topic? Was it going to be something that you would want to say that this is like your favorite movie of 2021, right? All right. So the release March 5th, 2021. I actually just watched it this weekend. I am recording this on Monday, March 15th. So I just watched it this weekend, I think like Saturday or Sunday. And I'm just going to say I enjoyed it, okay? So very for those of you who haven't watched it, I'm not going to give you spoilers, but based is a set that's in the fiction of Zamunda, Prince Hakeem, which is played by Eddie Murphy. He learns to has a bastard child that is, and for those of you who don't know what the term bastard means, that means a child that was conceived out of wedlock. All right. He learns that, and the reason that is that King Jaffer, his father, played by James Earl Jones, and for those who don't know, he is Massa on Lion King for younger people. All right. But what beauty have James Earl Jones in this sequel, right? At the age of 90, like he literally just turned 90, and I think it was January this year. And he's still lucid. He was still funny, at least in my opinion. And even though his part wasn't super large in this particular movie, it's just awesome to be able to have that person, to have him there and to play the part. For those who saw the original, which came out in 1988, you would know that in the original there was also the Queen. I think it was played by Madge, and I think her last name is Silver. I forget her last name. Sorry, I should have did a little more research on that. Anyhow, she passed away. She they could have added someone else in there to recast it her, but they didn't, which I was very appreciative of. But anyhow, and then Prince Akeem and his loyal servant slash friend Simi, which is played by Arsenio Hall, go back to Queens to try to find this bastard child. So anyhow, now, so there are a lot of people out there that was like, this isn't funny. Like, why did you just leave this alone? Like, it was rushed and this, that, the third, and leave a classic and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so if you actually look on IMDb, and by the way, I never even knew what IMDb IMDb stood for until I did some initial research for this particular episode. But it stands for Internet Movie Database. Duh. I should have known that. Anyhow, as of today, March 15, 2021, I think the movie has a rating of like 5.4 out of 10. So anyhow, movie critics are critics. Is going to be that way. But I would just say that sometimes you just can't please black folks, particularly all of my friends and family on Facebook, who kind of have their concerns about it or didn't really like the movie. And quite frankly, they are entitled to their opinion. But here's what I want to think. I think that this movie in 2021, the sequel, was important for two particular reasons. First of all, or let me make 2 points that I think is important for my frame of thinking and my evaluation of the movie. A, this ain't a remake, right? This is a sequel, so it's a difference. It's not like they are trying to remake a classic, like they've done so many times with like Michael Myers or Jason and all of that, right? Or Spider-Man. Lord, I don't even know how many Spider-Mans we need, right? So this isn't a remake. It is a sequel, which I think is a little different. And I just think the movie exuded black excellence. I mean, throughout the movie, you think about the fact that we have primarily all of the original actors from the 1988 movie, even down to the Flower Girls. Like, in the movie, those little small details of all of these characters coming back in some form, shape, or fashion, whether it's a large part, small part, or not. I just felt like it was great that the originals, the OGs who did the initial movie, are out there doing it again. Like, who wouldn't want to see that, right? The other thing is, it's like you had great music selection. You had African music. You had Gladys Knight. You got on Spotify, there's like 8 or 9 playlists dedicated just to Coming to America and all of the different main characters that were there. It was great artistic imagery throughout the movie. You think about the castle and the fact that part of the castle, yes, it was created, some of it from CGI, but also apparently some of those rooms were actually filmed in Rick Ross's mansion. Like, so you have someone else who, as I understand, this was one of his favorite movies, and so he was able to be a part of this project, right? By having some of the rooms of his mansion filmed as part of the inside of this castle that Prince Hakeem, now King of Zamunda, lives in, right? The costumes, the wedding dress. Oh my God! Like, there was so much detail put into the artistic standpoint, and there was a lot of black folks behind the scenes working on this. And so I just felt like, for those reasons, like the black excellence aspect, I think is very, very, very important for me, right? And I just felt like the content of even the characters, like the things that they were going through in the movie, right? You saw character growth. There were jokes, yes, but you also saw some of the character growth. And one of the particular important aspects is the patriarchal system that was in Zamunda. You would see that begins to dither away, right? And you that resonates for what's going on currently, right? You have the Me Too movement. You got folks saying women are able to do just as much, if not better, than men. You have black feminism, right? Or Afro-conic, a black woman. It's like Kina said it, who was on one of my episodes, I think episode 36 or something. Right? So you saw this involvement, this growth in the characters, which I thought was pretty good. You saw strong women from the daughters to the wife, um, even to the individual who eventually marries the bastard child. And I forget his name. I should have remembered the name, but I forgot, right? And then you just think about what I learned is that I think Leslie Jones and Lunel, right? Apparently, they had issues for a while. And but for the fact that they actually worked on this set together, they probably wouldn't have moved forward and gotten over some of their issues. I don't know if they're best friends. I think I saw an interview where Lunel said they're not best friends, but at least they were able to get over the beef that they had for years apparently. So that's just the beauty, I think, of Coming to America. And I laughed and I thought it was great. I think it's always an excellent project to have black folks seen in a positive light, black folks growing. And so for me, I just think that's important. So that's my take on Coming to America on episode 38, which is Back to Blackness. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is the legal system still failing us? And when I'm saying us, in this particular point, I'm talking about black folks, right? People of color as well. Is the legal system failing us? And the reason I bring this up is that I was looking at something the other day, and I saw that on March the 5th or sometime this month, there was 3 individuals in New York who were convicted of capital murder, basically a double murder. They were convicted in 1996. The 3 individuals are Rohan Boat, George Bell, and Gary Johnson. So they were accused of, tried, convicted of killing the store owner of this check cashing company, as well as an off-duty officer, right, who was moonlighting. And for those of you young folks who don't know what moonlighting is, that means working like another job off hours, right? Yeah. So instead of just saying a second job, people call it moonlighting because it's typically at night, right? The second job is typically at night, moonlighting under the moon, the light of the moon. So anyhow, 1996, they were convicted of this this double murder, right? And they were sentenced. So Rohan Boat was 35 at the time that he was convicted, and this was in 1996, right? So he was 35 at the time. Johnson, Gary Johnson, was 21 at the time, and then Rohan Boat was 19 at the time. Okay. Now, both Boat, who was 35, and Johnson, who was 20 at the time, were sentenced to 50 years in jail, and Bell sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, right? And so at this particular time, the individual who was at one point in time was crowned America's mayor, but now he's just a freaking psycho. Okay, he should be locked up somewhere, probably. Good old Giuliani, right, was the mayor of New York at that time, and during this particular time, he had campaigned, or at least stated publicly, that the individuals responsible for this murder or these murderers should receive the death penalty. And as it relate, I think for Bell, the 19-year-old, the prosecutor at that time initially sought um, death penalty, the death penalty, right? And so I want you to let that resonate for a moment, right? In the event that either of these individuals would have been sentenced to death, right? There's a possibility me sitting here today on March 15th, recording this, you're listening on Wednesday, March 17th, right? When it actually comes out, or viewing it on March 17th. It's a possibility that one or two or three of these individuals could not be here if they were convicted and sentenced to death and the execution was carried out. So I want that to sit for a moment, right? Think about that, right? And so this is part of the problem where there are allegations of a crime. I understand that someone lost their life. I'm not shedding any kind of disrespect on that issue. But when we begin to talk about sentencing and we begin to talk about the cases without knowing anything factually, right? Because there hasn't been an investigation completed yet. I think it was very nascent at that particular time when it came out that these two individuals were deceased. It was a crime, obviously. So you have a rush to judgment, and sometimes when you have a judgment, the convicted individuals in the eye of the public sometimes it's not beneficial, particularly when you are an elected official. You're the mayor, right? So there are a lot of things that you and a lot of different types of folks that you are allegedly representing in your in your city. Secondly, as a prosecutor who's elected, there are certain things that you need to make sure that you understand factually about the case before you try to convict someone in the eye of the public, right? So we kind of already have a battle there, right? But why am I even talking about this? Because they were just released. Okay. 25 years later. So convicted in 1996, in jail for 25 years. Okay. And the only reason that they are let out is because there was an investigation done by the Queens District Attorney's Office. The crime, I think it's called Crime Integrity Unit, CIU, I think is what it is. Oh, sorry, Conviction Integrity Unit, CIU. And so what is this unit? This unit is a group of individuals within the district attorney's office who are looking at the way, the manner, the means in which cases are adjudicated, right, and prosecuted by individuals who are sworn to uphold the law and prosecute crimes and criminals to the fullest extent of the law, right? But these are some internal checks and balances about whether these systems are working. Could we have some best practices that come out of it that will make it even better, or things of that nature, right? So what happened? So this particular unit was investigating this case for about almost a year, right? Looking at the evidence, looking at what happened at trial, talking to witnesses, blah, 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 blah. Come to find out, wait on it, that the individuals were convicted because, right, they were convicted, but the prosecution, okay, did not turn over evidence, or they withheld evidence that was exculpatory in nature. So let me repeat that. The prosecution, whoever these individuals were at that particular time in 1996, right, withheld exculpatory evidence, right? And so what's exculpatory, right? What is exculpatory evidence, right? It's called a Brady violation, right? So the Brady, there's this famous case out of Maryland. It is out of the Supreme Court. It is Brady versus Maryland. It is in 1963. Okay. So 1963, this case came out, and basically what the Supreme Court said, I'm just going to read this, so that's why I'm looking at this. It says that the suppression by the prosecution of evidence favorable to an accused upon request violates due process where evidence is material either to guilt or to punishment, irrespective of the good faith or bad faith of the prosecution. Okay, so listen to that. Let me repeat that. The suppression by the prosecution of evidence favorable to an accused upon request violates due process where the evidence is material either to guilt or to punishment, irrespective of the good faith or bad faith of the prosecution. That means that the prosecution don't even have to maliciously attempt to withhold evidence if it could be potentially exculpatory to a person's guilt. In other words, saying that this person may not have been guilty of this crime. There's some credible evidence that this person might just be innocent, right? Or if it's in regards to the punishment, if there is some kind of evidence that committing the punishment related to a crime, these things should not be suppressed. And why is this important? In 1963, the Supreme Court said, because society wins not only when the guilty are convicted, but when criminal trials are fair, our systems of the administration of justice suffers when any accused is treated unfairly. Okay. Now, this was 1963. Okay. And remember, when I started this particular section of this episode, I said it's the legal system failing us being black folks, people of color, right? And so in this particular case, this particular unit, the CIU unit, uncovered evidence to show that a gang member had implicated himself in the crime. Okay. And one of the individuals who testified against one or two or even three of the convicted, right? And that witness identified himself as accomplice, meaning that in some form or shape or help, or some form, shape, or fashion, he assisted the individuals or individual in committing the crime. But in this case, his evidence or his testimony was that he was accomplice to these individuals to accomplish the crime, whether that's bringing them there, whether that's acting as a lookout, whether that's driving away, whether that's harboring them later. However, he was involved, right? But what happened is that there were some mental health records about this witness, which the defense was unable to obtain, right? And why is that important? Because if a witness has mental, how best can I say this? If there are issues with one's mental state, right, that could presumably be evidence that the defense could use to cast doubt upon that person's story, so that when the jury members are listening to this person's testimony, they would be able to weigh how, if at all, credible this witness is to them, how, if at all, they credit this person's testimony, whether all of it, portion of it, none of it. However, but the fact of the matter is that it was open. It was left open in the courtroom that this person presumably was telling the truth. And so the defense didn't have the mechanism to attack that person's credibility, the substance of their communications in regards to what they were saying, that they were accomplished to this particular crime. So these things are important, right? Now, the defense actually made a request during the process of preparing for the trial. The defense actually made a request, y'all. Listen to me. about information related to gang members, because apparently there was some kind of communication or some kind of knowledge that presumably, potentially, gang members were involved, right? They requested this information, but they didn't receive any of it in discovery. Now, granted, the CIU came out and said there was nothing nefarious from the prosecution, right? And basically what they're saying is that the prosecutors did purposely withhold, the prosecution did not mislead the defense or hide information, but instead this information happened to be in other files unrelated to the case involving these three individuals, but related to cases involving some of these gang members who were potentially implicated. Okay. So in other words, the evidence was there, right? But for whatever reason, housekeeping, organization, chain of custody, for whatever reason, this evidence was not associated with or kept in contact in the file related to either Boat, Bell, or Johnson, right? And just think about that. That's shitty, right? The fact of the matter is that if, as a defendant, I would want the opportunity to say, bruh, I ain't do this crime. That wasn't me. Like, it was this person. He already implicated himself. What did the police officers, the investigators, what did they do to find out this information, right? So that's what exculpatory evidence is. It's just evidence that can either cast doubt upon a person's guilt or to mitigate essentially a punishment. Now, that was in 1963. There have been other cases from the Supreme Court thereafter that even without the request, if a prosecution knows that information is potentially exculpatory, it is their obligation as conduits of justice makers, right, to effectively turn that information over to the defense so that the defense can use that in the preparation of their case, right? So this was just particularly unfortunate that these individuals had to end up being in jail for 25 years. Now, the director of I'm just going to read a statement that he came out and said, but the director of the CIU said, these prosecutors did not intentionally mislead the court, but we cannot ignore the fundamental unfairness in which key exculpatory evidence never came to light during the trial. The constitutional safeguards in our criminal justice system failed here, and the result has deprived everyone involved of the certainty and finality of justice in this case. All right, so I'm talking about this case. So what does any of this mean? Are they exonerated? Can they sue, right? We were like, show me the money. I've been there for 25 years. And unfortunately, whether or not they can sue is really dependent on whatever cause of action they think they can have. But these men are not exonerated, okay? They were released, and the indictment that was initially provided or held against them is still pending. So essentially what is probably going on at this point is that the investigators are picking up the pieces and trying to start over to make a determination whether or not there's sufficient evidence to maintain these individuals. So basically, yes, they removed the charges as of now, but they're still pending, so they're not exonerated. In other words, they're not found innocent. Okay, so that's a difference. Exoneration is, I ain't do this, and y'all know I ain't do this, and so now y'all correcting the record, right? But right now the indictments are still pending, so presumably they could be charged again and tried again, right? And so what happens is, or what happened in this particular case, is that all three men are out on their own recognizance. So they're on a recognizance bond. And so basically what a recognizance bond in almost every jurisdiction that has them says this: look, I'm telling you, I'm going to be there for trial. Let me out, bruh, so I can go and be in society, right? So my word is bond. That's kind of where that thought process comes from, or that saying, right? causing its bond is saying, I'm giving you my word. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there. So there's absolutely no reason for me to give money or any other kind of guarantee other than my word. And so you let me out as a result of that. All right. So that's where we are. But yeah, it's like time and time again, we are coming across people who were falsely accused, folks who were in jail, just waiting and waiting and waiting, right? And so this is a great segue to another issue that I want to talk about, and this is entitled it. You got money? Sometimes that means you get freedom. Okay. If you got money, sometimes that means you get freedom. All right. So why? What am I talking about? Right. For most individuals who are in the legal profession or even come in contact with the legal system, whether that is a witness in a trial, you go and you have been charged with something, you're on parole, you have some kind of connection to the legal system, right? Um, I think inevitably and without fail, most individuals, some do not feel this way, but a lot of individuals feel that the concept of cash bails are a problem. And it's inherently a problem, right? Because disproportionately it impacts people of color, particularly African Americans, Hispanics, and folks who are lower in the socioeconomic scale, right? Or their socioeconomic status is low. They're in poverty. They just don't have the money, right? And so one of the cases that always brings me back to this concept of cash bails, and why I think that they are fundamentally problematic for various reasons. But folks sit in jail not because they have been convicted. They sit in jail because they don't have money, right? And if you don't have money to post bail, whatever that amount is, then you can't get out, right? You think about some of these folks who were charged with some horrific crimes, right? But because they're millionaires, so their family is well off, they can be out on bail preparing for their case. And I think I've said this multiple times. Being able to be out and truly prepare for your case gives you an advantage for your defense versus someone who's cooped up in jail, who has to abide by when the person can be seen, visiting hours, how long they could be on the phone call, right? Yes, lawyers can go in and have a little longer time with their clients. That's a drag. That's a hassle. Like, I'm in jail. I have the wherewithal, or I don't have the benefit of having my documents. I don't have the benefit to talking to Julie down the street, all X, Y, and Z. And because I have a relationship with her, she's going to talk to me so that I can give you information, my lawyer, so that you can go and investigate and prepare for the case, right? So if I'm behind bars without being convicted at this point, the ability for me to prepare for the defense of my case is limited and reduced. And one of the cases that's fundamentally ridiculous that we even have to talk about this case, but it is also sad. This individual is no longer here, right? Khalif Browder, right? We've talked about this on one of the episodes, the 13th episode, right? But Khalif Browder was an individual, a young guy in New York who was accused of stealing the backpack. Now, to this day, I don't even know what was allegedly in the backpack, whose backpack it was, where this backpack was allegedly stolen from. But this is also an issue with shoddy police investigation, rush to judgment, or individuals who are implicitly biased against individuals because of the way they look, because of their background, or because of who they hang out with, right? Putting that aside, he literally sat in jail for 3 years, had no trial, right? And I want to say at one point, there were no true charges against him, right? Sat in jail for 3 years because he could not afford the $3,000, which was his bail. Now, okay, some of you are saying, well, why couldn't he just go and get a bail bondsman. We'll talk about that too, right? Fundamentally, about how disproportionately impacted people of color are, even with that system, which I think is predatory, right? And I think there have been quite a few studies out there to show that bail bondsmen, and I would tell you this, I guarantee you're not going to see a bail bondsman in Hollywood Hills or wherever, or an affluent community, because inevitably they are on the street corners in urban cities, right? Or low impoverished areas, right? I remember in Detroit, there were bail bondsmen, I don't know how many of them, especially near the courthouse. In Albuquerque, when I used to live in Albuquerque, they were in downtown Albuquerque, right by all of the houses, because they know these are potential clients. I'm going out here, give you my car. Hey, you need a bail bondsman, come see me, right? But he didn't have the money to get out. Eventually, those charges were dropped. You hear that? Drop, meaning nada. They didn't have anything. He shouldn't have in the first place. And then 2 years later, he committed suicide. He endured such while in prison, and even when he came out, that he ultimately determined to take his life. So it's sad that we even have to talk about him in that light, right? We should be talking about how bright he is. We should be talking about how artistic he is. We should be talking about all the good things that he was. We should be talking about how awesome his smile is. We should not be talking about him in the past tense, because of that is allegedly supposed to be set up for the fundamental point of seeking justice, right? We shouldn't be talking about him relating to this, but unfortunately we are. This is just the system that we're in, right? Now, back to this cash bond, right? You have the money. If you had the $3,000, you can pay it, be gone, right? That's collateral, right? Once you get to court, you go to court, whatever, you get your money back, right? As long as so the difference between a recognizance bond and a cash bond is that instead of me just giving you my word that I'm going to be there, I need to put something up as a guarantee that I'm going to be there. And if I don't show up, whatever I put up can be taken. That's why some families' homes are taken, because the individual with whom they love, right, the person that they love, they put up their home to get the person out. That person doesn't show up, and so their home is taken. Okay. Now, back to a bail bondsman. Well, before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about some of the studies, right, in regards to cash bail. There have been several studies to show that there are a large number of people just sitting in jail waiting. I think I already said that, but they're just waiting for a trial. Some waiting for pre-trial. Some waiting for the actual trial. And the only reason that they're taking up space, running up the numbers in jail, right, is because they just don't have the funds to get out, right? And then that segues or purpose to the fact that bail bondsmen come into the picture, right? What's a bail bondsman? It's a business, right? People say you got 10%, right? You've heard that typically it's 10%. You put in 10%, put up 10%, and the bail bondsman will guarantee to the court that you're going to show up, right? And if you don't show up, then that bail bondsman is obligated to pay the system, right? Because you didn't show up. If you do show up, they're fine, right? This is how they make their money, because that 10% that you put on, you don't get back. It doesn't matter whether you are rendered guilty or innocent. That's money that you've lost. So if your bail is $35,000 and 10% of that is $3,500, you just lost $3,500 no matter what, right? Win, lose, or draw. But the part that people are doing are trying to get people out is so that they could legitimately prepare for the case, and they don't want their family members just sitting in jail. And quite frankly, studies have shown, particularly in individuals in lower impoverished communities, a lot of these individuals who are in jail are the breadwinner for that family, right? So if you're in jail sitting, you can't make money for the family. So we need to get you out, right? And so what does this do? That means that families who don't have the wherewithal to technically pay, they start asking family members, right? They start asking friends, right? And bail bondsmen are famous for this. And I think there's also a study to show that there's kind of this psychological game that they play, where it's like, can you ask your mom? What about, your mother or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your fiance? They're not going to want you to stay here. Just ask them. They can ask their extended family, right? So there's just this rolling effect of all these individuals getting wrapped up and to getting money to give to the bail bondsmen so these individuals can get out, right? So it's a cyclical system that is fundamentally flawed and problematic for particularly individuals of color. And there's a study to show that black women take the brunt of a lot of these 10% bail bondsman gigs because they don't want their son, daughter in jail sitting. They don't want their boyfriend, wife, whatever, cousin, brother sitting in jail. And again, these are people who are breadwinners for that particular family. They need to be there, right? And so they take on that stress on their shoulder, right? So it's just fundamentally an issue. And okay, so I know that you probably said, okay, well, that's left up to the states and they can do blah blah blah, right? All right. Now we've heard almost 3 years ago, California was going to get rid of cash bails. Actually, it was a bill that went to legislature. It was signed by the governor and the people, and the power to be reached in there and snatched it, right? They had a referendum. It was like, nah, bruh, we, we ain't doing that. Cash bails are here to stay, right? So even though that law passed, California technically is not in effect because there was a referendum on it. So they did not get rid of it, right? The city of San Francisco, as early as February, there was a new district attorney was assigned to that particular city. And that district attorney came in and was like, nah, we're not relying on cash bails at all. So the city actually stopped using cash bail, but other places in California still using it, right? So California isn't doing it, isn't rid of cash bails. But the only state to actually get rid of it, the first state to get rid of it, is Illinois, right? Illinois recently passed sometime this month omnibus bill. That's basically a big bill with a whole lot of different things in it. And you pass it with a particular voting strategy, and you can't really have all these debates about it, right? There's some rules related to it, and so that's why a lot of these things pass, and these omnibus bills, because appropriation bills are in there, money being exchanged, right? In this bill was the fact that they are eliminating cash bails throughout the state. So there's the first state to actually take some concrete action, effective action, to combat what has been considered a criminal justice issue. And this was sort of like a criminal justice reform, right? And not only did they get rid of cash bail, but they also have other things in there, mandatory body cameras, right, worn for the officers in the state of Illinois. They're setting standards on the force in the police department. They're doing de-escalation and arrest techniques, so individuals understand, who are law enforcement, understand how to communicate with individuals. There are individuals who have mental issues, and we already know and have heard and seen in the news all these folks who've been restrained and killed, who are who have mental issues. And because our officers sometimes are not trained to recognize, understand, and de-escalate, it causes an escalation with individuals being harmed, or some folks unknowingly killed, right? And I just want to read one of the things that the Illinois governor said in passing this. What he said, it says that this legislation marks a substantial step toward dismantling the systematic racism that plagues our communities, our state, and our nation, and bringing us closer to true safety, true fairness, and true justice. And then he said, in the middle of a brutal viral pandemic, I think this is great, this quote, that hurt people and brown people disproportionately, lawmakers fought to address the pandemic of systemic racism in the wake of national protests. Think about that. Our folks in Washington couldn't get nothing done relating to this, right? But this state decided to do what it needed to do to address issues that impact folks throughout. I just thought that it was great to talk about this, particularly cattle, because they are fundamentally problematic. All right. So I'm sure you all heard about those two Georgetown Law students, professors, who were on a Zoom call. How the Zoom call was recorded. Basically, one of the professors was talking about how the black folks or her black students are inevitably the lowest, and they cause her angst that they're there. There are some good ones, but there are a lot of them that's just not. And I'm like, oh my God, we are in 21 at an institution that is supposed to be a pillar, right, in the legal profession. We have individuals, adjunct professors, having these conversations, not about how do we move the needle to ensure fundamental fairness in the way that the law school system is set up. They're talking about a group of individuals, black folks, right, being at the bottom, right? And it's just really problematic that we are here in 2021 still talking about this because they think blacks are at the bottom of the damn barrel, okay? Perhaps you're teaching, right? Perhaps you don't understand diversity and inclusion, right? Because many of your teaching practices don't speak to the folks that are in your room, right? And particularly if you're a mediator, right? She's teaching negotiation, mediation. You would think that that's what she would be able to do: read the room, understand what's going on, and go forward with that. So ultimately, one of them was terminated. The female, she was there for 20 years. God rest. It sucks that potentially this was going on for 20 years, right? Because if you're having this conversation in 2021, I find it very difficult to believe that in the process of grading papers and this, that, and the third, that implicit bias and weigh in, and maybe you negatively impacted students because of that, right? The other professor was placed on administrative leave as they were going to continue to investigate it, but ultimately the other day, I think he resigned in the midst of the investigation. So, some folks still think blacks are at the bottom of the barrel, but guess what? We not at all. At all, people. All right, so that was the episode 38, Back to Blackness. Straight up no chaser episode, back to Blackness. All right, so I'm your host, Sean, here at Peeps Creek Café. Remember that you need to continue to drink, listen, and converse. Tell a friend. Hey, if y'all have topics you want us to cover, you have we talk about crime here too a lot. There's some crimes that us to talk about, cover, or you want to come on, reach out to us. Our contact information is in the notes of every episode. All right, until next time, peace, and guess what? love.